Well, I'm doing a wonderful song called Glorious Mud.
Good morning. Today is Friday, March 29th, 2024. It's the Senate Natural Resources and Energy. We're resuming our work on Act 311. We have finished our walkthrough with Mr. Chakowski of the first 30 sections. So we're hoping to get Mr. Kirby back to fill in some other sections we didn't get to. We finished all the sections with Mr. Gray, so we're closing in on that review, but I think the sections raised interest, maybe I think are the first 30. So two things. One, wanted to double back and come forward to Bill. If you have questions that have come out of our discussions in the last 2 weeks, actually, but more formally over the weekend, I'd like to ask if people would really go through 311 again and start sorting questions into bins so that we can dig in. For instance, priority housing projects or the lack thereof came up as a topic of discussion more than once, and concern. So when we come back on Tuesday, we'd love to have us as a committee highlight the issues we want to get more information on, and then methodically start to look at possible changes, etc. I know where changes will make some people concerned, but I think there's things that we heard don't necessarily aren't entirely well constructed yet. For instance, the notion of a roller coaster ride to permanent rules as opposed to a ramp to permanent rule. It's not a help to anyone to have something open the door, close the door, open the door again. It's a lot more user friendly. If it was a ramp, some people knew what we were doing and plan based on it. So that has I'll ask people to do over between now and next Tuesday, if possible. The other thing is that check-in, I still don't have a firm date for how long the morning will be operating, but it's always, we open the calendar. We probably have I would say at least we may only have 3 weeks. It's possible we'll get a fourth. It's a full morning committee. So 3 weeks is 12 meetings, at which time we need to wrap 311, 308, and we'll get H687, the house, which will be built next week. Right now we're scheduled to do a walkthrough on Thursday. I want to look at the schedule again and see if we may want to pull up closer one day if we can gain a day, given that we may only have 12. We also have the res that's arrived. Those are our two big lifts from here to the finish line. We'll have, and then other years by meeting at like 8 or 8 to 9 prior to when finance committee members get called in early and social members called in early to deal with the money. We can usually get an hour to an hour and a half and keep things moving. But so that's anyway, we have a lot of work to do, not that many days. And I think we'll be fine because we've been through this year after year. We'll just organize ourselves well and make good use of our time. That's where I'm at. We go through 311. And distill out of it the things that seem like important. The other thing is, if you're really feeling like an eager beaver, when you get hold of 687 and start to read through. Of course, a lot of it's going to seem familiar because it's the same topics we've been talking about. So I do have a question about, I don't know to what degree, I know there were many amendments offered on 687, never of them succeeded, right? If we want to start reading, but not read something that's sort of so out of date that we're wasting our time or confusing our terms, can you point out what, is there something we can look at yet?
No.
No, right, I mean, someone's gonna have to reconcile all the amendments, and we going to bill.
So, we'll have to do that. It's not me. It's up to
The
you.
clerk's office, right?
So it can happen today. Why not?
Okay,
But you can start with the House pass, the committee pass version.
which is 10-1.
Yeah.
10.1. So, I'll send a link around on 10-1, and if people want to get started. Let's do that. All right, so, on terms of, the kind of finish the clean sweep of 311, Attorney Kirby is here, and I can. Could you join us at the table, so that can walk us through the sections? Where I'd say we're in the operating, at the 40 to 60,000 foot altitude.
Yeah,
Once in a while, people digging in on that question, but we, since it's tax provisions, not our bailiwick in here, but. Good for us to have a sense of some of the thinking on the money side before the. Goals of the bill in terms of. So then you could start us off, I think it's section 27, right?
Yes, that's what I have here. So Kirby Cleveland Legislative Council. You'll have to forgive me a little bit. I might be a little rusty. It's been a while since looking at this. It's been a little while, I think. So, starting on, section 27 on pages 29 and 30. There are some changes to the property transfer tax. So the changes in, this version of S 311, it creates a new property transfer tax rate. A new category, for tax of 2.5% for residential properties that will not be used as a principal residence and are not used for long-term rentals. That's a way of trying to get at second homes. And
I never say this again, where are you?
section, yeah, page 29.
Thank you.
And can we back up one step and just remind me, community set table that, the current PTT, how is that structured?
So the current PTT has a rate of 1.25% on transfers of all properties. For principal residences, there's a lower rate of 0.5% for the first 100,000 of value. And then there's a lower rate for principal residences that are purchased using financing from NHFA, VHCB, and US Rural Development. In that case, it's 0.5%. You can like that's 0.5% for the first 110,000 of value. And
Like a chart or anything that you would recommend?
there are charts. JFO has wonderful charts. The Department of Taxes actually does have a good chart for the current version of the PTT if you look on their website. And the chart is helpful because there are many different categories.
Would you have time to locate that and send a link
Sure.
to the community?
Yeah, I can send you the current law version of it. And then there's the clean water surcharge. That's not what we're looking at right now, but that's another 0.2% that's applied, except that it's 0% on the first 100,000 value. So the changes in here would be to create this new category where there's a 2.5% rate for residential only properties that will not be used as a principal residence and are not used for long-term rentals. Long-term rents that won't have a tenant, if they have a tenant or if they're going to be used as the principal residence, then that 2.5% rate would not apply. And there's a change increasing that threshold amount that's taxed at the lower rate for the ones I was just mentioning that got financing from CHCB, et cetera. That threshold rate is being increased from 110,000 to 150,000 under this.
Commissioner Watson.
Thank you. So this is a conversation that we've had a little bit of in our other committee in the afternoon. And so how do you know that a property would have fallen into this category?
The Department of Taxes would have to look into that. This is, so when a return is filed, the taxpayer, the transferee, off of paying tax. Would file the return at the time of the transfer, the department, and would mark what the use would be. The department's able to look into that first, knowing whether it's residential or not. They would look at the grand list to see how that property was classified on the grand list. And then to see whether it's being used for a long-term rental. There's a couple of grand list categories that are helpful. It's considered residential property if I think it's 6 units or fewer, I think it is the number. It goes on the grand list of residential. If it's more than that, it goes on the grand list as commercial and this would not apply. So that's how they can kind of look at it. They can look at the grand list data and then the department could look at the compliance from there, whether it's through auditing and other methods.
I see Mr. Tucker from his hand. Just, I don't know if you want to share a little information.
I can.
Peter Tucker. We have expertise in the room with them. Always wrong people, so thanks.
Sorry, Peter Tucker, Vermont Association of Realtors, you know, so 4 units and under is owner occupied residential, considered residential.
So it seems to be 4 units that go on the grand list of residential, so 6, right, sorry about that.
4 to 4, I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
Chairman McDonald?
Charlie can confirm that.
So is the proposed tax discussion that the property transfer tax will be treated, administered somewhat like the income tax with as a marginal rates as the value of the house goes up, the tax.
What you're describing is what is just passed through the House last night. There's a housing bill that does have property transfer tax changes that have a kind of a marginal structure, what you're describing. But this one is just having a new rate for a subset of categories of properties. So not exactly like a marginal rate, it's just a different rate for a different category, for a particular category.
So the examples given us that out of it. It's sort of like having money you can take off your income and an income tax rate before you start paying.
Yes.
You have where your income is determined.
So there's a little bit, for principal residences, there is a bit of a marginal thing going on under current law because of that 0.5% on the first 100,000. But this H29 from the House has an even more marginal type setup than current law.
Mr. Chair, it's having been described as a bit of a marginal rate. I would hope we would pursue it and substitute for bit chunk. And take a look at the various possible chunk opportunities there might be. So,
H29 is marginal, not just a bit.
And sorry, just procedurally, so to remind people, we have this bill, we're gonna be 687 is the bill is moving. So amendments that come out of 308 and/or 311 will lay on 687, that bill will move out of here and then down the hall to finance and approach. So and that being a deeper dive on the money, but I just wanted us to have an understanding. What we're always talking about money as a way to incent things or de-incentivize, so I want us to have an idea which way the bill's inclined in terms of what it's trying to encourage or discourage. Thanks.
Sure, so that's the section 27, and then so for sections 28 through 30, there are some changes to the property transfer tax revenue allocation. What the changes amount to is the additional revenue that's generated from this new category with a 2.5% rate. That additional revenue is being allocated 70% to Housing and Conservation Trust Fund and 30% to the Municipal and Regional Planning Funds. And then the current revenue allocations would stay the same. So there's some changes in math throughout here.
Yeah.
That amount to what I just said, a distribution like that. As a reminder, under current law, the VHCB trust fund receives, in statute anyway, it receives 50% of the PPP revenue. Municipal regional planning receives 80%. So the municipal regional planning fund receives 17% of PPP revenue, and the general fund receives 33%. So under current law.
So current is 50% the Housing Conservation Trust Fund. And can you say the other numbers?
17 to the municipal regional planning fund.
Yeah.
And 50% or 33% the general fund. And with the caveat that the appropriations process always notwithstands that and appropriates out of the funds the amounts that they want to, and they don't really stick to those numbers. Yep.
Any questions on this? Room?
So sections 31 through 2 on pages 33 through 36. This would annually transfer 2 million of PTC revenue, and it's adjusted for inflation to the Act 250 permit fund. So this is a new allocation of the PTC revenue.
And I know it's not your job to sort of pitch the bill, but in terms of I don't know if you can represent her thinking. I mean, is this if there are more properties exempt from the Act 250 process, what supports the Act 250 process? And I don't know if it's to help or administrative fund it, the program administratively. Although that begs the question for me, if you're having fewer Act 250 projects, what do we need to stand up staff for an Act 250 project? So I haven't quite heard an explanation yet. That's why we're creating a funding stream for them and sending less work to them. That's not your job, so.
Yeah, I don't know the background there. I mean, obviously, this would be a consistent revenue source.
Yeah.
Or at least in theory consistent, because it's in statute, but it could be not understood. Maybe that was the thought.
Sure. Well, I know there's been conversation too, thanks, from a new, governance structure for predictable, sustainable funding for staff, and we'll also have a lot of work to do with, in terms of, it's my understanding, as proposed, to address the designated areas with the new tiers, and map review, planning, and helping stand up the new tiers.
Do you want, I can,
Yes,
and I can
Please.
add to that slightly, so Ellen McCaskey, Office of Legislative Funding. Also, all the exemptions
yeah,
will lead to less permit fee revenue.
Yeah.
Which currently does fund most of their funding needs are for staff. So while they will have some less work to do, we'll also have a good amount of less funding coming in. And they're already at a deficit.
yeah. Thank you.
So on for sections,
Sorry to interrupt again.
oh yeah,
But,
If you want,
Yeah.
PPL, Executive Director for the Natural Resources Board. So I think there's two things going on here. One is the stability of funding, we're based on construction costs.
Yeah.
Right now, which is variable and depends on the economic, position and other factors, what's being built. And then also, in terms of the number of staff, et cetera, we're anticipating that there will be a good deal of work.
Yeah.
With this new structure.
We're talking about the tier.
But it will be, yes, so, but I imagine that it will, some of it will be different work than what we are doing currently. But with that said, I mean, even in the tier 2 areas, you're going to have, the road rule, how that impacts what we're going to be seeing in terms of, new projects remains to be seen. So there will still be that ongoing underlying work as well as whatever might be on top of that with the structure that comes out of any bill, so. Not necessarily less work, but different work.
Thank you. Right, back to you, Mr. Kirby.
Sure. So sections 33 through 37 of the bill, which are pages 36 through 45, were originally an administration proposal to create a property tax exemption that freezes property values of certain newly constructed and rehabilitated principal residences for 2 years. And the 2 years is a change that was made in committee. The original proposal was to freeze those for 5 years. And so that was the change to the proposal that the committee made.
Sorry.
I'm looking, it's several, yes, section 33 to 37. So do you want me to walk you, I can walk you through the actual section instead of giving you the big overview.
Yeah, because I don't quite understand how it does that.
Sure, I'll walk you through the pieces. One of the tricky things about this job is never knowing how granular it is.
Yeah.
Okay, so section 33 creates a statutory purpose for this property tax exemption, and then section 34 creates a new subchapter within the property within the property tax exemptions chapter. This subchapter is dedicated entirely to this one exemption we're talking about. It lays out definitions for things that are used, for the terms that are used for the exemption. And the definitions related to qualifying improvements matter for the regulation of it. And there's definition of rehabilitation, because that's part of what has to be done. But if you want to look at the exemption itself, it's on page 39, starting at line 5. So a value increase exemption. So under this exemption, when there's an increase in the appraisal value or increase, in the value of a property that's due to qualifying improvements, which is, things that are related to like rehabilitation, that extra value that's added from that work is exempted from property taxation for the 2 years. One of the limitations though to this is it has to be in certain places, and I don't have it in front of me, I need some village centers, designated downtowns. There's a federal designation called a new market tax area, something like that. And so yeah, so it's limited to certain places. Education tax is only exempt, or only education tax is exempt, and then a municipality could choose whether to also include municipal taxes in the exemptions.
And this is the marginal value of English,
So the increase,
and it goes, was rate 200. You do the rehab, it's rate of 4. These benefits apply to the $200,000 more that it's worth, and the underlying, the original basis, the 200 is treated the same as it is in commercials. Labor.
yeah, so for 2 years, it would be taxed as if those improvements weren't done. It's one way to put it.
Senator Watson, and wait.
I'm just noticing the similarities to the TIF
Yeah,
structure, and I think maybe I just need to listen more. I'm a little confused as to the framework around this. I feel like I understand what it's doing, but I'm not sure. Like in a TIF, it's boundary. And what is?
For this, the boundary is those areas that are set out law, like a designated downtown, village centers.
So is this like an automatic TIF?
It's an exemption that could be claimed by a person making improvements, right, into a property in one of those areas. New construction or rehabilitation.
And the structure has to be blighted.
Oh, the structure has to be blighted. Well, for it to qualify. I think I had missed that.
yeah, I just,
And the exemption is on the tax, on the added value of fixing up the blighted property.
So there's, I haven't gone to it, but there's a process that in order to claim the exemption that the taxpayer would have to go through. They, to use the exemption, the property owner has to gain certification from ACCD. For this, and then the agency, and then, so there's a review process by ACCD on this exemption. And then the agency can revoke the exemption if the requirements are not continuously met. And then, and if it's revoked, then the owner would have to repay the taxes that were previously exempt when the exemption was coming.
Blight and blighted, so going back, this is one of those where the definitions really count. The notion, Mr. Farrell, you're referring to blighted, how do we express what a blighted property is?
I believe there's a definition in there, but
It's not in section.
One that sells for less money than an unbladed.
There's a property tax exemption that was proposed by the or property tax transfer. Property transfer tax exemption that was proposed by the administration that used the term blighted. That's a different thing.
So this is not for blighted properties.
I think this is not specifically for blighted properties, this is for,
Any,
qualifying property. Again, and I apologize, because I've not recently read this. Qualifying property means new construction or a physical change to an existing dwelling or other structure beyond normal and ordinary maintenance. And it results in new or rehabilitated dwellings that are designed to be occupied as a principal residence and not short-term rentals.
that's.
And occurred through the new construction rehabilitation or both during the 12 months immediately preceding. And then it does not mean, there's some things to exclude, but so really it's going through that ACCD review process to make sure that it's a qualified property.
This,
Please.
thank you, can you say more about what would make it a qualifying property?
located within a designated area.
Located within the say downtown village center or neighborhood development area. So yeah, the NDA is what I was
Okay.
trying to remember, and or a new market tax credit area, which is a federal thing. Composed of one or more dwellings designed to be occupied as principal residences, provided none of the dwellings shall be occupied as short-term rentals. And also provided that a structure with more than one dwelling shall only qualify if it meets the definition of mixed income housing under 10 VSA section 6001 sub 27. And then a couple more things.
Okay.
For the definition, undergoing or has undergone or will undergo qualifying improvements, which is what we were talking about before, about what qualifies as improvement.
Mhm.
And then it's in compliance with all relevant permanent requirements. And then I can read the definition for rehabilitation, that was part of it.
And that could be like rehabilitation could be a qualifying improvement.
Yes.
Okay.
Or a new construction also is something that qualifies.
Or new construction. Whew,
I can send it around one page that the tax department put together on this, if that would be helpful.
that would be helpful, I guess, just so you know, like where I'm standing on this like first impression. So that it makes me nervous and so I understand this would be right, so this is gonna affect education taxes or money in the education.
Yes, that's correct.
And then that is. I would like, I assume there's no fiscal note on this yet.
JFO, I don't know about fiscal note,
Yeah,
but there's been some estimates for this proposal.
okay, that would also be helpful.
And I believe, well, it's either Pat or Ted, I'm not sure.
I mean, I have been an advocate for TIFs. Feel like I have wrapped my head around that, I know what they do, I know what they're for, I know their boundaries, I know their limitations, I know their criticisms, you know what I mean? And so, And I know the issues with the but for, right, like, and what we're trying to do with TIFs. I need to sit with this.
So, Mr. Frill, if you. You know, we're trying to figure out, I think, one, if there's information that either you have in your department or you can point us to, that'd be great. The other thing is, I don't quite yet understand that the ACCD review is, you know, like the, so that you say, yes, this is kind of a qualifying change. I mean, I'm reading things like rehabilitation and there's trigger like equals or exceeds a total cost of 15% of Brandon's value, so. Or 75,000, whichever is less, so it's might give up a scale change. The qualifying improvement thing sounds like a fairly ordinary thing that people might do to the home, because it says beyond normal and ordinary maintenance, painting, repairs, or replacements. So all to the better that housing improves. People just want to better understand what qualifies and what even though it's not our bailiwick exactly, how the money works. We'd like to understand it well enough to know that we can support the money side of things.
I could walk through a little bit of the administration of the ACCD application process if you want, that would be helpful.
Sure, we have an idea how that works.
Sure.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah, certainly come.
the word used to describe this earlier in the testimony appropriately is this behaves like a TIF. Am I accurate? And TIFs are refined, and the TIFs we have now don't match that definition. It's a TIF was a forgivable loan, or those are my words, attached to it. TIF is where you have to pay back for the infrastructure constructed, and our TIFs in many of our cities, you don't have to pay it back. It comes out of the ed fund, and that is a like it, yes. It's a TIF that doesn't, it's been changed from not being a TIF to something that is TIF like, so. That needs discussion. Not this morning, but be aware that, don't go home with the idea that it's a TIF.
Yeah, it's just similar.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to find it now, I recall from when I looked at this before that there is some language in here that you can't use this exemption if it's already in a TIF district. Because you can't double this.
So if you're in a designated downtown, that is also a TIF district.
Would not use this, you would use the TIF. In there.
So
But I'm not even sure how double the new work when you're just passing a portion of the value.
There, Mike?
thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this section is probably not one that we really have ownership on. It would be, if
Yeah.
the spill will go to finance, I assume, because of this.
Once remodeled, rehabilitated, whatever, the remodeled 687 lanes here, it'll for sure go down the side.
Yeah, personally, I would just like to ditto what the senator from Watson brought up. I have some concerns about this. I do think it adds some. Yeah, exactly. So shockingly enough, I agree with Senator Watson on this. So I realize we probably can't like weigh in on it, but I already have some concerns. Because it does feel like the purpose of a long-standing process to not, the amount of work it takes to get access to not putting money into the education fund now for many communities is a long, arduous process, and it's a lot of community conversation, that's a lot of state house conversation, and it's for a very short period of time. And this 2-year concept, while it is short, I feel like we are potentially allowing folks who are going to be making revenue and income off of something not have to pay into the education tax at a time when or to the education fund, one at a time, we are very clearly in a need to put things forward to the education fund. So I have some questions and concerns, but I don't think we technically,
It's not.
yeah, it's not our jurisdiction, so I'm willing to just take a step back and not dig too deep on it. Okay.
Mr. Chair, my remark was just raised. You just said what I was trying to
Oh.
get at, which is, we saw yesterday how territorial disputes get in the way of achieving our goals. And this is another opportunity to accidentally fall into one territorial dispute or something. Thank you.
Yeah, but look, most of boundaries.
Yeah, I'm just trying to make sure, you know, the complicated bill, but a lot of these parts are connected. And so eventually, even though finance will work its way through in great detail, steps. With at least our committee to be conversant enough with what's in there that really are. It's, we start out from a place of good information as we hear how the bill evolves over time. Sullivan.
Megan Sullivan, Vice President of Government Affairs for the Vermont Chamber of Commerce. I just want to make a real differential on what. This is a property tax stabilization that the owner of the property gets.
Yep.
Tax and increment finance is a benefit that the town gets
Yes.
for their public improvements. So there's actually there's a huge difference in what these
Sure.
proposals are.
Yeah.
One is stabilizing the property tax for a developer. TIF is a way to finance public improvements. So
Yes.
these are starkly different. So currently, communities can offer tax stabilization for developers on the municipal side of property tax. So if the municipality says, in order to incentivize this developer to do this project that otherwise, well, no other municipality wants to, there's no municipalities don't have a bubble. But they can say, we are going to stabilize your future taxes for a certain number of years on the municipal side of your education funding. In order for that developer to make that pre-investment in the property. The municipality can also offer tax stabilization on the education fund side only if the municipal voters approve it and are willing to make up the difference. So where the municipal voters say, we want this development enough that we will all share the cost of the education fund side, so the education fund is always made whole. I did not weigh in or follow this proposal, but just hearing it, I believe what it is saying is that this gives the opportunity for the education fund side to be held at stabilized for 2 years without other members of the municipality having to make up that difference in order to try and get some of these properties that have been sitting vacant back into a growing brand list value. And so TIF districts
Yes.
were excluded from that because in a TIF district, you're relying on the incremental value from a property to repay your debt. So if you stabilize the increment that's coming in, you don't have the incremental value coming in
Yeah.
to pay the debt. I think. From my understanding, some of the current TIF districts would say. We need all tools in the toolbox. And I'm sure this will come up in finance more than in here, but 2 years of stabilization over a 20-year period of gaining increment. Would be factored into a financial plan to see if it would work out, but they can speak on that, but just trying to explain the difference between TIF and tax stabilization and how it currently works versus the proposal.
Thank you, that is very helpful, and to my recollection, TIF districts are also for a much longer period of time. They're 20 years.
20 years of
Stable.
retaining increment or, yeah,
Whatever the
So it gives a payback,
whatever the town plan is.
right?
10 years of development, 20 years of that 70% of increment going into a TIF fund.
And this is only 2
This
years.
is 2 years of stabilization.
You keep saying stabilization, but you just mean not paying.
Stabilization means you're paying what the value is at the time purchase.
Like for
So your grand list value will grow when you put the improvements in, and this will say for 2 years, you pay the property tax of the value of when you bought it, regardless of the improvements that you put in.
Yeah,
And
so
then after that
not-
2 years, you pay that higher value.
I guess I just feel the term stabilization is a little, feels like a marketing term for the project,
I
rather than.
believe that is the statutory term.
I'm sure it is.
It is actually matching what's exactly framed on the municipal side, it is taxing information.
Just when I just wanna be clear, when we're saying stabilization, it means not charging tax for 2 years.
Additional tax.
No, you're still paying your tax.
No, I understand, yes, I understand,
Your taxes are frozen.
yes,
State.
Sure, just a different.
Yeah.
But I pay the increase in the assessed value for.
even though it has been improved, and you can make revenue off of it, and even maybe get rent.
Right, so you pay at the basis and then
Including forgivable loan
It's definitely an incentive,
against the income.
is it a
Should I
earned
pay back?
incentive? That's the question.
So for 2 years. Breathing goes out and in, let's come back in, ready, and, that should have Kirby, let's finish up this section, please.
Oh, thank you. Could you make Jen?
So the proposed property tax freeze for education tax would sunset in 2037, and that's the last detail about that. Then we can move on to the property transfer tax proposal. So section 38 on pages 45 and 46 would create a property property transfer tax exemption for transfers of blighted dwellings. We've heard it all before, that will be rehabilitated as a principal residence. Blighted is defined as substandard structural or housing conditions, including unsanitary, unsafe dwellings and deterioration sufficient to constitute a threat to human health, safety, and public welfare. And rehabilitation would mean extensive repair, reconstruction, or renovation of existing dwelling beyond normal and ordinary maintenance, painting, repairs, or replacement without demolition, reconstruction, or enlargement. And when we were discussing property transfer tax previously, this exemption would be claimed when a return is filed. And then it would be up to the department to look into whether that was correctly claimed or not.
So this is, on transfer, so if I see a blighted property, and I think there's good opportunity to create housing. And I'm paying $200,000 to buy that blighted property, ordinarily there'd be the 1.25% or whatever, that is an ordinary purchase. And this is not a delay like the ones we're just talking about, this is you exempt for it until if the next owner buys it from you, that's when there's conceivably there'll be a PTT then.
So, yes, there would be,
Yeah,
if it's fixed up and then flipped.
because it wouldn't be blighted anymore, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Thank you.
If there's no questions about that, we can move on. The last change for the tax parts is on 39, section 39, pages 46 and 47. This deletes or removes the add back for the amount deducted at a federal level that is attributable to the payment of an entrance fee or recurring monthly payment made to a continuing care retirement community. The amount that exceeds the deductibility limits for premiums paid during the tax year on qualified long-term care insurance contracts.
The pure tax change, right, that for people going into.
So the insurance fees for continuing care, but Vermont does not allow the federal deduction currently. Or at least the full, and this would.
So we separate out federal code on the point.
Yeah, so this change was to bring Vermont back into allowing us, those deductions from Vermont.
So definitely not part of what this committee will look at. I mean, this issue has been in the building in various incarnations. Not to stick to in one place, but it came up over people going into Wake Robin. Those sometimes called like the Wake Robin issue sorted out. Okay, and I think that's it for that, right?
Yes.
Any further questions for? Please, Sarah,
Is there any, so like we had local, tax stabilization policies in Montpelier. And we actually updated it while I was mayor. As long as mayor, anyway, there was discussion around whether or not local stabilization policies could stack on top of a TIF district. Some places were doing it, some places were not. Is there anything explicit in statute that would prevent you from stacking the local stable, if it pencils out, right, like you still be able to pay off your TIF? Is there anything preventing you from stacking?
I think. I should probably, I was not
Oh, yeah.
prepared to talk about this.
Sorry.
There's no.
Totally.
Actual thing in this bill.
Yeah.
But I can look into that and give you some more information.
Well, and.
Actually,
Hmm?
It looks like Megan might have some.
I believe in the changes that were made to TIP last year. That. I believe part of those changes were that you could not have. Tax stabilization agreements in this, but. That was proposed last year.
So, if on behalf of the committee, you could look at that. Well, it's not that we need to get deeply into the tax piece, but we should understand what, how a whole new round of exemptions and stabilization would, work together. Just the bill is about how things.
Well, and my. In as far as the project continues to pencil out, just to express this, I would be interested in seeing if we could explicitly allow. If it's,
To allow municipal voted exemptions to coexist with inattentive district. Great question.
or with the exemptions that are proposed. With this other flavor of local exemption, or I guess it's a,
With the
The-
proposal here.
yes.
Okay, so it's, if I'm recalling correctly, it's explicitly excluded from TIFs.
No, but like if there is a municipal, for example, Montpelier has a tax stabilization policy, could that stack with? Which is our policy also encourages housing, and so could it stack on top of what's proposed here?
Oh, it could. I can answer that question.
Okay.
Because that's not a tip question, that's just.
That's not a tip.
Right, yes, Montpelier could do that.
Yeah.
It could also, under the language here. Just allow this same 2-year treatment that's done, that would be done for the education tax. It could vote and opt into doing that for municipal taxes.
Okay,
Under this language.
okay. Okay, well, thank you. It might be nice to make that explicit. If it's not,
It is.
it is, okay. So.
Like, you're asking important questions, which often don't get asked until after the bill has left the committee. And then once that's happened, the people that didn't understand what benefit from it come in and say, but you said. And the people whose pockets are becoming less full go, wait a minute, that wasn't part of the deal. Well, it always was, you're just having it explained to you now in a way that you understand. Which often happens between communities.
Senator Watson, if you want to see the details yourself, it's page 40, subsection C. This,
Thank you very much. Just before you leave the chair, is there anyone else in the room who would like to continue to this conversation before we wrap up? On these issues. Yeah. Not seeing anyone, and if you're here to provide at some point more formal testimony, we're happy to schedule time at the table with me, okay? So that, thanks very much. Chelsea, did you rejoin us at that table thing? Right, so I just wanted to make sure that before we're adjourned for a weekend, so we have a chance to ask questions, so that would see the entire call. And spent a lot of time on the especially in the first 30 seconds. Do committee members have any questions for council? Yes, I know that's going to be a real review for next Tuesday. But I don't know if I have a lot of things marked up on copy, and I don't know if we want to spend a little time getting some initial answers. Sometimes it's worth getting some information so that when you do a careful read through, you're better positioned to understand what you're looking at. You're right.
Mr. Chair, I think what I'm struggling with this bill is kind of two factors. One, what do we actually, should we be reviewing? Because I have lots of questions on lots of things, so I'd love to know what sections we should be reviewing. And then I'd also love to know which legislative council person is on each of those sections when I do have questions, because I'm already confused about who's covering what base. So that is actually what would be most helpful for me in my process for understanding the bill. It's just you.
I mean, I don't know, you wanna work on tax?
Well, I guess that's kind of my point is there anyone else? It's just you.
Right. So you have the outline handy.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So next account
Yeah.
is everything through
If I'm 1 through
section
26,
26. Then Mr. Kirby is 27 to 39. And Mr. Gray is 40 through 67.
by the way, it's Kirby Keaton,
Oh, I'm sorry.
yeah, his last name is Keaton.
Thanks for. Better late than never. You feel polite, you never straightened me out.
He's checking us.
I had to be with Mr. Kirby, so it must be Sweetwater.
Okay, so 1 through 26, Ellen, Keaton, 27 through 39, Greg, 40 through 66.
Yep.
And that's easy. Wow, that was a lot easier than I thought.
Yeah.
That's great.
Please.
And then what sections do you feel are pertinent for us to be?
So I
Person.
thought it would be helpful for us to understand the whole thing, but really our bailiwick is focused on 1 through 30.
Then I'm gonna prioritize with my limited time, those sections.
Okay.
And then my finance friends can expand on here.
It is handy that half this committee goes down all the finance, so we can hear about things and carry things back and forth.
Thank you, that was great.
Right. If there aren't questions for council, then we can move on. But I just wanted, while we had a chance to see Mr. Tusky again. Thought it was worth grabbing the opportunity. Sometimes it's hard to see council because of things going on.
But from now on, just the Senate.
Your House life and your Senate life are gonna be the
Yeah.
same.
Yes.
All right, so then let's leave. That alone for now, and we have Ms. Sullivan with us. So would you like to join us at the table to talk about 311?
Maybe.
Maybe.
I'll join you, so we'll see how it goes.
Not, yes, not every invitation feels as good as every other invitation. But, so, we've been asking people, you have impressions about, 311 that you think things highlight that you would like us to be aware of? Could be things you think are important, that we should, or things where you feel like, oh, there's maybe some concerns about them. And then the other thing is because you've also been really leaning into all this and, well, I think following 687 as well. If there are things that are coming that you think you want to highlight, that we should be aware of, and maybe we might see some strength in 687 and you think we're be worth incorporating, I don't know. Assuming anything, but anything goes here.
Okay. Megan Sullivan, Vice President of Government Affairs, Ron Chamber of Commerce, I know I said that over there, which is, some say it here. Happy to join you today. I will warn you, I was not expecting to join you today, so it's a little lenient, but also happy to answer questions about
Sure.
areas that may have come up. I have been spending a great deal of time in House Environment and Energy as they've gone through 687. So I have a pretty good grasp on what is in that bill. And what happened on the floor this week would be 10 amendments that were added to it. So I think we see a lot of great opportunities with what Senate Economic Development did on the interim exemptions, really setting up to where we are at in our housing crisis right now, as well as the work that was done in House Energy and Environment and thoughtfully thinking through how we're if we're moving to a just tiered based, location based jurisdiction, the planning for that, how to ensure, which was priority for some of the rural representatives in our community, creating a robust planning process to think about the tiers, get a lot of public input, really incorporate the work the RPCs do in that work, and bring in a lot of different voices to talk about what tier 3 would look like. I think there's some differences in how those tiers are conceptualized in these two bills, but I'll probably assume where this committee spends a lot of time. I think probably right now, one thing that I'm ready and willing to speak to is the issue of appeals. That currently 311 addresses appeals by adding judges to the Superior Court and changing some of what how appeals qualifies for appeals. And this approach is something that we are much more supportive of than what 687 does, which is bringing appeals to the newly created environmental board in 687. We are very supportive of professionalizing the board and what that looks like in terms of having larger full-time staff to do the important work of working with commissions and coordinators to ensure that Act 250 is being administered in each part of Vermont in a way that is consistent, in a way that is predictable, and that what we're moving forward in these bills with is a pretty historic change in how we administer land use. And I think it's, rightly made places and people very nervous about what that will mean, especially in rural Vermont. And as these changes happen, as the stakeholder processes take place to determine what is tier 2, what is tier 3, if we create something like a road rule, ensuring that the coordinators have time to understand when that first jurisdictional opinion request comes in, that they have received the level of training and have the opportunity to ask questions that they need so that we are setting them up for success, because these are big changes. And it is going to take time not only to create the rules, to go through the rulemaking process, but that's just a start for our commissions and our coordinators. Once that's done, then they have to learn what that means, how to implement it, what does a new application look like? And that's gonna take additional time. And we don't see moving appeals to the board during that time when we need that professional board to be focused on that training as setting this change up for success. And so how we can support the court system in continuing their appeals during that time is important. And if the professional board is doing the work that we think is really important in that oversight, then having them then say, we're providing oversight, we're doing the training, and now we're going to hear the appeals for decision, is setting them up for conflict. We want them to be fully integrated in making sure that we're getting fair and consistent outcomes. And appeals are a legal process that should be through the court.
And I just pause to make sure I understand, so is it a capacity to do the work issue in your mind, or you said conflict?
I think currently it's a capacity to do the work. I think the conflict comes if they are doing the work and saying, how should these things be administered? How are your decisions being made? What type of decisions should be making in different cases? Then they should be more integrated with the commissions and the coordinators. So then hearing the appeals to the decisions that are made by those bodies, sort of you're the judge and the jury in these situations. Having an outside neutral perspective of the court is important in our view. So I would say the two pieces are currently the timing and 687 appeals go to the court in 2026. That is far too soon into this massive shift in how things are going to be administered for that to happen. I think generally we have broader concerns, but certainly from the start, the timing, whether in 2029, 2030, this should be revisited to say, okay, things have been established, things are working well, the professional board is doing this work, and we're seeing fair and consistent outcomes across the state. Can we relook at this? And we certainly have to have that conversation.
Sure. So one of the concerns I've heard about the going to environmental pollution in Superior is that it can be a long time from arriving with your docket to getting the rule, and seems like the number of 400 days comes.
Yeah.
So for we're all interested in fair, accurate, timely answers on legal questions. Is it your sense that adding judges will solve that problem?
Certainly adding judges will solve that problem, are gonna be a piece of that. And I think you're having Judge Zonay in, and Judge Zonay was part of the NRB study stakeholder group. And there was a conversation that happened there. I certainly don't want to speak to him, but there was a conversation there about while, there may be backlogs and across the courts.
Yeah.
Certainly, it sounded like there could be opportunities for prioritizing how appeals are handled, so housing, which is obviously a huge priority for the state. Is there a different track that housing appeals in the court can take that may expedite that could help with the time frame? So again, I don't want to speak for him, but I think that could be a important conversation to have.
Well, and the other model, I would want to think about it, I'm just sharing an idea as it comes, and that is that the PUC is quasi-judicial body, and it plays a role. I don't know if people say, oh, it's a model because it delivers more timely decisions or not. There's always concern. Anytime there's a review and any adjudicatory process always seems to have folks involved in it that say, I wish it were faster. And I think that's a given.
Right.
But how timely can we be? And I'm gonna ask myself to think through. What can we look at that's going out of the PUC that might be useful analog for, if we think about this one. So, I'm sorry, Tim, what, you had a question?
I had a general question because we do have, I know that you said that you've been a part of the conversations and the back and forth with the House bill. I'm just wondering, kind of, I don't want to ask a general question if there's specific things that were directed.
No, this is an open-ended conversation and it's all.
But just wait, one remark on the PUC. One difference that I would ask you to think about is that the PUC does not have regional commissions. The appeals that the PUC would look at are not from staff that they oversee.
Right, and there's also, I don't know to what degree they're. We rely on them for, my understanding, the OB board was that as they would work through and resolve a case, that those were. Or issuing a permit, that those became like case law precedential and helped decide future events. So, and they're building a record in a way that I'm not sure that the PUC's record built in a very similar detail.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's a question for you. And we can come back to it. I'm just wondering, what can we learn from what's going on over there that might be helpful as we think about the only other quasi judicial body I can think of.
So. The PUC is issuing permit decisions,
Yeah.
they're not issuing appellate decisions.
Yes.
So yes, there isn't the same precedential effect.
Thank you. So thanks, right, no RPC analog, no district, sorry, no district commission analog.
Yeah.
So as you watch the back and forth and as it's coming over from the House, since you're with the chamber, yeah, that's your job. I'm wondering if you could speak to any differences between what you're seeing in 311 and in what's coming over related to workforce housing. If there's anything that you would highlight that would be a benefit, because we had a Chamber of Commerce breakfast and that was the thing that they wanted, was there was no specific, we asked them about 311, we asked them about, and that was what they were most concerned about, was access to workforce housing. And I'm not seeing anything that feels like really addressing that in a concrete way, so I don't know if there's something coming from the House or that you're advocating for that I'm not understanding.
So I think there are housing programs. The difference between 311 and 687 is that 311 is sort of an omnibus housing land use bill that takes programs and land use changes and tax changes and puts them together. 687 is really more specific to land use and designations. How a revamp of how the state's designation programs work and are defined. So those are gonna be key differences. The House has a separate housing bill from their land use bill. And their housing bill, I think it's today. And we have serious concerns about the House housing bill and the workforce programs that would address workforce housing not be in there.
Okay, that's okay.
And I think there's really important pieces on work, on some of the programs certainly in here. But we would in 311, sorry.
Yeah.
But I think what we're seeing too is there are a lot of issues, right? Like solving Act 250 is not gonna solve our housing crisis. Putting money into programs is not gonna solve our housing crisis. There are so many pieces that are going into this. The availability of workforce to actually do construction, the cost of materials, there's a lot that happens with housing. And I think, VHFA has a great presentation about sort of the 10 pieces that are really heavily impacting housing in Vermont. But one of those pieces is certainly in land use and
Yes.
the exemptions in tier 1A and tier 1B are where we see that incentive of saying build housing, and we're gonna reduce the regulatory time and cost with those exemptions. And looking at how do we say in areas where we can be building thousands and thousands of units, where we want thousands and thousands of units, how do we try and incentivize building in those areas? And saying in other parts of Vermont, you can still build housing. And we're gonna try and incentivize it to be done in a more dense way, so that we're not seeing one-off,
Yep.
one-off houses that go into forested areas that are creating opportunities for one family that may have a higher environmental impact, not going through permitting, but when we're talking about housing for thousands of families, it's going through a lot more permitting, or it's going through that extra piece, saying let's incentivize people to build here. So it's a piece of the puzzle of workforce housing, is how do we incentivize building more housing? And I think the other piece is the professional board providing that guidance so that developers are getting predictable and timely decisions. Is a big piece of that. The municipal zoning that's in 311 is not in 687, and I would also say is one of those other pieces of the puzzle that 311 addresses, that would be important to incorporate into a bill.
Thank you. And it's interesting that they've kind of separated the housing, the land use piece. I had not fully understood. That's gonna be interesting.
Yeah, so 829 is the housing bill. We have concerns, serious concerns about that. Okay. 687, the land use bill. I think there's opportunities to certainly bring good pieces of 311 and more pieces of 687 together, and 308, oh my gosh.
308, H308?
No, that's.
Oh, I don't think I read that back.
It's our bill.
That's
Okay,
right.
Yeah.
So we even picked it up and walked through it. It was like 6 weeks ago, which feels like a year ago. Maybe it's 8 weeks already. Okay, wait, anything else you wanna share informally? I mean, you can also weigh in on stuff next week and the week after, but I think
Yeah, I
probably
think
2 weeks out, we're aiming to have come to a bill on all the stuff, including the integrated melding.
well, yeah, I think we'd certainly love to weigh in then, and when you actually have 687 in front of you. And just one more piece on the tax, that I would say to the idea of, are we, paying somebody? Should we be paying somebody to stabilize or freeze their taxes?
Not having.
And Senator Watson, you may know this best as the former mayor of Montpelier, but incentivizing redevelopment in our downtowns is challenging. And when you see certain stores that are easily popping up all over,
You mean the J. Crews of the world?
that part of the reasons you see those smaller stores popping up is because it's a lot cheaper to build new
Yeah.
in a greenfield than it is to redevelop a downtown building.
Bingo.
And so when you're trying to get a developer to invest in your downtown, it's already gonna cost them more in property tax because that is more expensive than building in a greenfield. And it will likely have some type of remediation because these are older, Vermont's buildings are older. So it does take. If we're going to try and get more redevelopment to happen in our downtowns, it does take incentives. To say, we want you here. We know that you probably can build out here, but we want you here, and so that 2 years of stabilization is. Can be an important tool to get there. That after that 2 years can have a, really important impact on, the money that's going into the education fund. More than the 2 years that you would be getting from that greenfield development.
But a municipality can already do this, is that what you're
The
saying?
municipality can do this on the municipal side,
Yeah, so they,
which is just a smaller piece, a much smaller bit. So stabilizing the municipal side doesn't offer a lot,
well,
because it's like 1/3 and the statewide is 2/3. So the municipality can go to voters and ask them to stabilize the education fund side if they'll make it out. That is a. Voters are already asked to take on a lot, so that's a hard question to bring to. And so. This proposal would not make municipalities go to voters and ask that, but recognizes the value that can come. The value that can come from that.
Yeah.
thank you.
So just to. Be why.
Sure, sorry, thank you.
Demographics, I think taxes, in theory, taxes should only be imposed for the purpose of raising revenue. But in fact, they're used as incentives and disincentives. And my recollection is that the property transfer tax, one of the motives for that was to create a disincentive for flipping. But so in this case, so by its nature, it's a disincentive. The property, and what we're saying is, we don't want this incentive to apply to stuff we want. That seems reasonable.
On the property transfer tax piece.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was talking about the stabilization, but yeah, we're
Well,
gonna agree on that.
stabilization
Right,
is-
I think it's to get investment in redevelopment. It does take a little bit more.
Certainly want to remove this.
Right.
Jimmy Chopper,
When you say that this way is a way to avoid having to go to the voters to pay for it. What are you saying? You didn't
I
say.
think I said that.
You said that. Well,
Why did I say?
what does it mean when one says?
When I get this.
Why we wanna go this way, so we don't have to go to the voters to pay for it. And when we do that, we're not going to the voters, but we're making the people we're not going to pay for it. That's.
Because we all have an interest in certain things not happening.
And some of us have an interest in some things,
Have that.
and they're the most. They give the most arguments of why you shouldn't go to the voters so they can get their things. It's human nature.
so, Ms. Owen, I don't know if you want to chip in anything more, and then Real Senator Watson, your point's well taken, we hear it. There's ways around. You had there are conversations people like having, there are conversations people would rather not have to have. And if the legislature says you don't have to have that conversation, some people feel a lot more comfortable. So, I can also, imagine the other side, if you're having to take on a blighted property and it's, you're gonna fund a lot of money to do that work. And I was just talking to someone about rehabbing their own home, and they were shocked to see how expensive it was just to do upgrades in their own home, not fancy upgrades, just fixing a new kitchen and then move a bath. And then it turned out to be $100,000 project. So I get how fixing a blighted property, someone's gonna have to shell out money to get that going. But then you'll have to have a tenant, and then finally you'll start to recover your investment. So I can imagine that someone say, well, could you make it easier for me to get started? I'm not arguing the case, I can just understand why someone would ask for that boost or something. So Senator Watson.
Thank you, I guess, my perspective on it, on the question of site is. I think of it as a kind of investment, short-term pain for long-term gain, and that, if this is going to ultimately benefit the community, then, can you sort of, can you take it for some amount of time? In this case, it's 2 years. I would still like to see like the fiscal note and like,
Sent that on.
oh, you did, okay, perfect.
It's not technically the fiscal.
Right, but
It would
the,
actually say, oh.
right, like that, because that, like how widespread it is could matter, but it also is a question. Like, can we invest now for a long-term return?
In the side, I can argue for on behalf of certain dollars, like, but the investment comes out of all the other
Yeah,
taxpayers who will bill, the other hand, you could say, well, it's a theoretical cost if it's only on the margin, right?
Right.
There was never that revenue to begin with. Now it's revenue that would come off the margin and you're just delaying the receipt of it. So like,
And if that property stays blighted and vacant, it's not gonna see any additional revenue
Right.
coming in anyways.
And its price will probably drop.
Right, Grandless, I mean, I think, there are
Which-
certainly areas where Grandless values are declining and the education fund is taking a hit for that.
okay, well, like probing tooth that might be getting pulled.
That's only the impression I wanna leave.
The old tooth is an opportunity.
Yeah. Right, so then dentistry without anesthetics, all right.
Mr. Chair.
Yes,
I have not mentioned for this week, this Friday, raw sewage overflow.
For the record.
And we are talking about a problem we need to solve with the house. And one of the things we're doing is we're making raw sewage overflows more expensive to fix. And then we're doing that and we're not talking about it. And we're saying, that's fine. This other thing is more important and we'll deal with that later.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So what makes you say that they'll be more expensive to fix? I get, but the amount of septic going into that system would go up if you had more units of houses. But the CSO event's driven by heavy rain. So why is it becoming more expensive? Honestly, I don't quite get why.
I don't spread manure every year on my farm, but when the second year comes along, I got twice as much to spread.
Yeah. Not quite much, but it was grass and and I have run a spreader quite a bit, so.
Haven't we all?
But yeah, well, you're the advantage of being at the table.
Those of us at the table.
Yeah, the advantage of farming is you get to run the spreader before you can put a safe house.
We know we're adding to the pollution of our waterways, and I'm doing it by saying. We're gonna build more houses where we know the sewage goes straight into the streams, and. The answer is, when you ask the question, the answer is usually silence, because no one wishes to even speak to the question.
Well, I'm happy to.
we'll
We'll
wrap.
deal with that later.
No, I want. We've asked you if you want to propose a bill, get behind it.
Any drafted language, I would love to.
Yes, let's make it
I
happen.
support you.
Let's get after it.
One thing we could all
I've got a couple. I'm just trying to think which telecom company it is that agreed to the language on spraying sewer fixing.
Okay,
Well, so another piece of all this would be that, as we used to be fearful. There are revenues related to bill thing. And it could be that we would want to think through, like, there's some portion of that revenues. to support CSO work, for one.
Well,
Solutions.
directly, because you're using the
We're gonna
real
raise
estate.
100 million, invest 100 million, maybe we say, hey, let's pay a little attention to an ongoing issue that is being solved, but at a rate slower than some people would like to see. So, thanks for carrying the CSO banner forward another week. And we're all sympathetic and listening and trying to look for an opportunity to do something. Okay, so it's 10:30, we take a break, so let me also just check in before we do. If there's anyone that, we're gonna have more, Mr. Tucker, for instance, you're scheduled, I think, next Tuesday, right? I don't know, and really Tuesday, 1:30 is our wrap, 3:11. We're gonna have Judge Zone, and like have Ted Brady come back and talk to us a little about all the municipal exemptions, I don't think. I'd like to, we started with him so long ago, I'd like to hear where he's at, that balance between state dictating municipal exemptions and towns feeling like they're in control of their own town. Judge Zoni on the appeals, piece of things, then we have a whole group of builders scheduled in, so we can hear sort of frontline, information on what are the challenges they're facing. To what degree is Act 250 part of it or other permitting? Since we've had conversations that have been really helpful to lay out. We have developing the municipal bylaw. The application of municipal bylaws right at PRP. The state permitting that followed, and then the Act 250 permit that can follow after that, so. What was it, public process?
Yes.
How many opportunities? So that's all those things are in our basket, for next week, but I never know if there's anyone who's here when we come back. That would like to offer, however casually or any remarks before we wrap for today. 11:15. Any hands or where?
I'm happy to make a couple small comments, I think. Special interest.
Okay, so, Mr. Farrell will be after break, if anyone else changes their mind. Or if he said something super provocative and that inspired them enough to speak, then